Once upon a time there were two princes who were twins. Their names were Acrisius and Proetus, and they lived in the pleasant vale of Argos, far away in Hellas. They had fruitful meadows and vineyards, sheep and oxen, great herds of horses feeding down in Lernafen, and all that men could need to make them blessed. And yet they were wretched, because they were jealous of each other. From the moment they were born they began to quarrel, and when they grew up each tried to take away the other's share of the kingdom, and keep all for himself. So first Acrisius drove out Proetus, and he went across the seas and brought home a foreign princess for his wife, and foreign warriors to help him, who were called Cyclops, and drove out Acrisius in his turn. And then they fought a long while up and down the land, till the quarrel was settled. And Acrisius took Argos and one half the land, and Proetus took Tiryns and the other half. And Proetus and his Cyclops built around Tiryns great walls of unhewn stone, which are standing to this day. But there came a prophet to that hard-hearted Acrisius, and prophesied against him, and said, "Because you have risen up against your own blood shall rise up against you. Because you have sinned against your kindred, by your kindred you shall be punished. Your daughter Danae shall bear a son, and by that son's hands you shall die. So the gods have ordained, and it will surely come to pass." And at that Acrisius was very much afraid, but he did not mend his ways. He had been cruel to his own family, and instead of repenting and being kind to them, he went on to be more cruel than ever. For he shut up his fair daughter Danae in a cavern underground, lined with brass, so that none might come near her. So he fancied himself more cunning than the gods, but you will see presently whether he was able to escape them. Now it came to pass that in time Danae bore a son, so beautiful a babe that any but King Acrisius would have had pity on it. But he had no pity, for he took Danae and her babe down to the seashore, and put them into a great chest, and thrust them out to sea, for the winds and the waves to carry them whithersoever they would. The north-west wind blew freshly out of the blue mountains, and down the pleasant vale of Argos, and away and out to sea. And away and out to sea before it floated the mother and her babe, while all who watched them wept, save that cruel father, King Acrisius. So they floated on, and the chest danced up and down upon the billows, and the baby slept upon its mother's breast. But the poor mother could not sleep, but watched and wept, and she sang to her baby as they floated, and the song which she sang you shall learn yourselves some day. And now they are past the last blue headland, and in the open sea, and there is nothing round them but the waves and the sky and the wind. But the waves are gentle, and the sky is clear, and the breeze is tender and low. For these are the days where Halcyone and Caix built their nests, and no storms ever ruffle the pleasant summer sea. And who were Halcyone and Caix? You shall hear while the chest floats on. Halcyone was a fairy maiden, the daughter of the beach and the wind, and she loved a sailor boy, and married him, and none on earth were so happy as they. But at last Caix was wrecked, and before he could swim to the shore the billows swallowed him up. And Halcyone saw him drowning, and leapt into the sea to him, but in vain. Then the immortals took pity on them both, and changed them into two fair sea-birds, and now they build a floating nest every year, and sail up and down happily forever upon the pleasant seas of Greece. So a night passed, and a day, and a long day it was for Danae, and another night and day beside, till Danae was faint with hunger and weeping, and yet no land appeared, and all the while the babe slept quietly. And at last poor Danae drooped her head, and fell asleep likewise, with her cheek against the babe's. After a while she was awakened suddenly, for the chest was jarring and grinding, and the air was full of sound. She looked up, and over her head were mighty cliffs all red in the setting sun, and around her rocks and breakers and flying flakes of foam. She clasped her hands together and shrieked aloud for help. And when she cried, help met her. For now there came over the rocks a tall and stately man, and looked down wondering upon poor Danae, tossing about in the chest among the waves. He wore a rough cloak of frieze, and on his head a broad hat to shade his face. In his hand he carried a trident for spearing fish, and over his shoulder was a casting net. But Danae could see that he was no common man by his stature, and his walk, and his flowing golden hair and beard, and by the 2 servants who came behind him, carrying baskets for his fish. But she had hardly time to look at him before he had laid aside his trident and leapt down the rocks and thrown his casting net so surely over Danae and the chest that he drew it and her and the baby safe upon a ledge of rock. Then the fisherman took Danae by the hand and lifted her out of the chest, and said, O beautiful damsel, what strange chance has brought you to this island in so frail a ship? Who are you, and whence? Surely you are some king's daughter, and this boy has somewhat more than mortal. And as he spoke he pointed to the babe, for its face shone like the morn star. But Danae held down her head and sobbed out, Tell me to what land I have come, unhappy that I am, and among what men I have fallen. And he said, This isle is called Seriphos, and I am a Hellen, and dwell in it. I am the brother of Polydectes, the king, and men call me Dictys, the netter, because I catch the fish of the shore. Then Danae fell down at his feet, and embraced his knees, and cried, O sir, have pity upon a stranger, whom a cruel doom has driven to your land, and let me live in your house as a servant, but treat me honourably, for I was once a king's daughter, and this my boy, as you have truly said, is of no common race. I will not be a charge to you, or eat the bread of idleness, for I am more skilful in weaving and embroidery than all the maidens of my land. And she was going on, but Dictys stopped her, and raised her up, and said, My daughter, I am old, and my hairs are growing grey, while I have no children to make my home cheerful. Come with me then, and you shall be a daughter to me and to my wife, and this babe shall be our grandchild. For I fear the gods, and show hospitality to all strangers, knowing that good deeds, like evil ones, always return to those who do them. So Danae was comforted, and went home with Dictys the good fisherman, and was a daughter to him and to his wife, till 15 years were past. 15 years were past and gone, and the babe was now grown to be a tall lad and a sailor, and went many voyages after merchandise to the islands round. His mother called him Perseus, but all the people in Seriphos said that he was not the son of mortal man, and called him the son of Zeus, the king of the immortals. For though he was but 15, he was taller by a head than any man in the island, and he was the most skilful of all in running and wrestling and boxing, and in throwing the quoit and the javelin, and in rowing with the oar, and in playing on the harp, and in all which befits a man. And he was brave and truthful, gentle and courteous, for good old Dictys had trained him well, and well it was for Perseus that he had done so. For now Danae and her son fell into great danger, and Perseus had need of all his wit to defend his mother and himself. I said that Dictys's brother was Polydectes, king of the island. He was not a righteous man, like Dictys, but greedy and cunning and cruel. And when he saw fair Danae, he wanted to marry her. But she would not, for she did not love him, and cared for no one but her boy, and her boy's father, whom she never hoped to see again. At last Polydectes became furious, and while Perseus was away at sea he took poor Danae away from Dictys, saying, If you will not be my wife, you shall be my slave." So Danae was made a slave, and had to fetch water from the well, and grind in the mill, and perhaps was beaten, and wore a heavy chain, because she would not marry that cruel king. But Perseus was far away over the seas in the Isle of Samos, little thinking how his mother was languishing in grief. Now one day at Samos, while the ship was lading, Perseus wandered into a pleasant wood to get out of the sun, and sat down on the turf and fell asleep. And as he slept, a strange dream came to him, the strangest dream which he had ever had in his life. There came a lady to him through the wood, taller than he or any mortal man, but beautiful exceedingly, with great grey eyes, clear and piercing, but strangely soft and mild. On her head was a helmet, and in her hand a spear, and over her shoulder, above her long blue robes, hung a goatskin, which bore up a mighty shield of brass, polished like a mirror. She stood and looked at him with her clear grey eyes, and Perseus saw that her eyelids never moved, nor her eyeballs, but looked straight through and through him, and into his very heart, as if she could see all the secrets of his soul, and knew all that he had ever thought or longed for since the day that he was born. And Perseus dropped his eyes, trembling and blushing, as the wonderful lady spoke. "Perseus, you must do an errand for me." "Who are you, lady, and how do you know my name?" "I am Pallas Athena, and I know the thoughts of all men's hearts, and discern their manhood or their baseness. And from the souls of clay I turn away, and they are blessed, but not by me. They fatten at ease, like sheep in the pasture, and eat what they did not sow, like oxen in the stall. They grow and spread, like the gourd along the ground. But like the gourd, they give no shade to the traveller, and when they are ripe, death gathers them, and they go down unloved into hell, and their name vanishes out of the land. But to the souls of fire I give more fire, and to those who are manful I give a might more than man's. These are the heroes, the sons of the immortals, who are blessed, but not like the souls of clay. For I drive them forth by strange paths, Perseus, that they may fight the Titans and the monsters, the enemies of gods and men. Through doubt and need, danger and battle, I drive them, and some of them are slain in the flower of youth, no man knows when or where. And some of them win noble names, and a fair and green old age. But what will be their latter end I know not, and none save Zeus, the father of gods and men. Tell me now, Perseus, which of these two sorts of men seem to you more blessed?" Then Perseus answered boldly, "Better to die in the flower of youth, on the chance of winning a noble name, than to live at ease like the sheep and die unloved and unrenowned." Then that strange lady laughed, and held up her brazen shield, and cried, "See here, Perseus, dare you face such a monster as this, and slay it, that I may place its head upon this shield?" And in the mirror of the shield there appeared a face, and as Perseus looked on it his blood ran cold. It was the face of a beautiful woman, but her cheeks were pale as death, and her brows were knit with everlasting pain, and her lips were thin and bitter like a snake's. And instead of hair, vipers wreathed about her temples, and shot out their forked tongues, while round her head were folded wings like an eagle's, and upon her bosom claws of brass. And Perseus looked a while, and then said, "If there is anything so fierce and foul on earth, it were a noble deed to kill it. Where can I find the monster?" Then the strange lady smiled again, and said, "Not yet. You are too young and too unskilled. For this is Medusa the Gorgon, the mother of a monstrous brood. Return to your home and do the work which waits there for you. You must play the man in that before I can think you worthy to go in search of the Gorgon." Then Perseus would have spoken, but the strange lady vanished, and he awoke, and behold, it was a dream. But day and night Perseus saw before him the face of that dreadful woman, with the vipers writhing round her head. So he returned home, and when he came to Seriphos, the first thing which he heard was that his mother was a slave in the house of Polydectes. Grinding his teeth with rage, he went out and away to the king's palace, and through the men's rooms and the women's rooms, and so through all the house, for no one dared stop him, so terrible and fair was he, till he found his mother sitting on the floor, turning the stone handmill, and weeping as she turned it. And he lifted her up and kissed her, and bade her follow him forth. But before they could pass out of the rooms, Polydectes came in raging, and when Perseus saw him, he flew upon him as the mastiff flies upon the boar. "Villain and tyrant," he cried, "is this your respect for the gods, and the mercy to strangers and widows? You shall die." And because he had no sword, he caught up the stone handmill, and lifted it to dash out Polydectes' brains. But his mother clung to him, shrieking, "Oh, my son, we are strangers and helpless in the land, and if you kill the king, all the people will fall on us, and we shall both die." Good Dictys, too, who had come in, entreated him, "Remember that he is my brother. Remember how I have brought you up, and trained you as my own son, and spare him for my sake." Then Perseus lowered his hand, and Polydectes, who had been trembling all this while like a coward, because he knew that he was in the wrong, let Perseus and his mother pass. Perseus took his mother to the temple of Athena, and there the priestess made her one of the temple sweepers, for there they knew she would be safe, and not even Polydectes would dare to drag her away from the altar. And there Perseus and the good Dictys and his wife came to visit her every day, while Polydectes, not being able to get what he wanted by force, cast about in his wicked heart how he might get it by cunning. Now he was sure that he could never get back Danae as long as Perseus was in the island, so he made a plot to rid himself of him. And first he pretended to have forgiven Perseus, and to have forgotten Danae, so that for a while all went as smoothly as ever. Next he proclaimed a great feast, and invited to it all the chiefs and landowners, and the young men of the island, and among them Perseus, that they might all do him homage as their king, and eat of his banquet in his hall. On the appointed day they all came, and as the custom was then, each guest brought his present with him to the king, one a horse, another a shawl, or a ring, or a sword, and those who had nothing better brought a basket of grapes or of game. But Perseus brought nothing, for he had nothing to bring, being but a poor sailor lad. He was ashamed, however, to go into the king's presence without his gift, and he was too proud to ask Dictys to lend him one. So he stood at the door sorrowfully, watching the rich men go in, and his face grew very red as they pointed at him, and smiled, and whispered, "What has that foundling to give?" Now this was what Polydectes wanted, and as soon as he heard that Perseus stood without, he bade them bring him in, and asked him scornfully before them all, "Am I not your king, Perseus? And have I not invited you to my feast? Where is your present, then?" Perseus blushed and stammered, while all the proud men round laughed, and some of them began jeering him openly. "This fellow was thrown ashore here like a piece of weed or driftwood, and yet he is too proud to bring a gift to the king. And though he does not know who his father is, he is vain enough to let the old woman call him the son of Zeus." And so forth, till poor Perseus grew mad with shame, and hardly knowing what he said, he cried out, "A present? Who are you to talk of presents? See if I do not bring a nobler one than all of yours together." So he said, boasting, and yet he felt in his heart that he was braver than all those scoffers, and more able to do some glorious deed. Hear him! Hear the boaster! What is it to be? Cried they all, laughing louder than ever. Then his dream at Samos came into his mind, and he cried aloud, The head of the Gorgon! He was half afraid after he had said the words, for all laughed louder than ever, and Polydectes loudest of all. You have promised to bring me the Gorgon's head. Then never appear again in this island without it. Go! Perseus ground his teeth with rage, for he saw that he had fallen into a trap. But his promise lay upon him, and he went out without a word. Down to the cliffs he went, and looked across the broad blue sea, and he wondered if his dream were true, and prayed in the bitterness of his soul. Pallas Athena, was my dream true? And shall I slay the Gorgon? If thou didst really show me her face, let me not come to shame as a liar and boastful. Rashly and angrily I promised, but cunningly and patiently will I perform. But there was no answer, nor sign, neither thunder nor any appearance, not even a cloud in the sky. And 3 times Perseus called, weeping, Rashly and angrily I promised, but cunningly and patiently will I perform. Then he saw afar off above the sea a small white cloud as bright as silver, and it came on nearer and nearer till its brightness dazzled his eyes. Perseus wondered at that strange cloud, for there was no other cloud all round the sky, and he trembled as it touched the cliff below. And as it touched, it broke and parted, and within it appeared Pallas Athena, as he had seen her at Samos in his dream, and beside her a young man more light-limbed than the stag, whose eyes were like sparks of fire. By his side was a scimitar of diamond, all of one clear precious stone, and on his feet were golden sandals, from the heels of which grew living wings. They looked upon Perseus keenly, and yet they never moved their eyes, and they came up the cliffs towards him more swiftly than the seagull, and yet they never moved their feet, nor did the breeze stir the robes about their limbs. Only the wings of the youth's sandals quivered, like a hawk's when he hangs above the cliff, and Perseus fell down and worshipped, for he knew that they were more than man. But Athena stood before him and spoke gently, and bid him have no fear. Then, Perseus, she said, he who overcomes in one trial merits thereby a sharper trial still. You have braved Polydectes and done manfully. Dare you brave Medusa the Gorgon? And Perseus said, Try me, for since you spoke to me in Samos, a new soul has come into my breast, and I should be ashamed not to dare anything which I can do. Show me, then, how I can do this. Perseus, said Athena, think well before you attempt, for this deed requires a 7 years' journey, in which you cannot repent or turn back nor escape. But if your heart fails you, you must die in the unshapen land, where no man will ever find your bones. Better so than live here, useless and despised, said Perseus. Tell me then, tell me, fair and wise goddess, of your great kindness and condescension, how I can do but this one thing, and then, if need be, die. Then Athena smiled and said, Be patient and listen, for if you forget my words, you will indeed die. You must go northward to the country of the Hyperboreans, who live beyond the pole, at the sources of the cold north wind, till you find the 3 grey sisters, who have but 1 eye and 1 tooth between them. You must ask them the way to the nymphs, the daughters of the evening star, who dance about the golden tree in the Atlantic island of the west. They will tell you the way to the Gorgon, that you may slay her, my enemy, the mother of monstrous beasts. Once she was a maiden as beautiful as morn, till in her pride she sinned a sin at which the sun hid his face, and from that day her hair was turned to vipers, and her hands to eagle's claws, and her heart was filled with shame and rage, and her lips with bitter venom, and her eyes became so terrible that whosoever looks on them is turned to stone. And her children are the winged horse and the giants of the golden sword. And her grandchildren are Echidna the witch adder, and Geryon the three-headed tyrant, who feeds his herds beside the herds of hell. So she became the sister of the Gorgons, Stheno and Euryta the abhorred, the daughters of the queen of the sea. Touch them not, for they are immortal, but bring me only Medusa's head. And I will bring it, said Perseus. But how am I to escape her eyes? Will she not freeze me too into stone? You shall take this polished shield, said Athena, and when you come near her, look not at her herself, but at the image in the brass, so you may strike her safely. And when you have struck off her head, wrap it, with your face turned away, in the folds of the goatskin on which the shield hangs, the hide of Amaltheia, the nurse of the aegis holder. So you will bring it safely back to me, and win to yourself renown, and a place among the heroes who feast with the immortals upon the peak where no winds blow. Then Perseus said, I will go, though I die in going. But how shall I cross the seas without a ship? And who will show me the way? And when I find her, how shall I slay her, if her scales be iron and brass? Then the young man spoke. These sandals of mine will bear you across the seas, and over hill and dale like a bird, as they bear me all day long. For I am Hermes, the far-famed Argus slayer, the messenger of the immortals who dwell upon Olympus. Then Perseus fell down and worshipped, while the young man spoke again. The sandals themselves will guide you on the road, for they are divine and cannot stray. And this sword itself, the Argus slayer, will kill her, for it is divine and needs no second stroke. Arise and gird them on, and go forth. So Perseus arose and girded on the sandals and the sword. And Athena cried, Now leap from the cliff and be gone. But Perseus lingered. May I not bid farewell to my mother, and to Dictys? And may I not offer burnt offerings to you, and to Hermes, the far-famed Argus slayer, and to Father Zeus above? You shall not bid farewell to your mother, lest your heart relent at her weeping. I will comfort her, and Dictys, until you return in peace. Nor shall you offer burnt offerings to the Olympians, for your offering shall be Medusa's head. Leap, and trust in the armour of the immortals. Then Perseus looked down the cliffs and shuddered, but he was ashamed to show his dread. Then he thought of Medusa and the renown before him, and he leaped into the empty air. And behold, instead of falling he floated, and stood, and ran along the sky. He looked back, but Athena had vanished, and Hermes, and the sandals led him on northward ever, like a crane who follows the spring towards the Ister fens. So Perseus started on his journey, going dry-shod over land and sea, and his heart was high and joyful, for the winged sandals bore him each day a 7 days' journey. And he went by Cithnus and by Chios, and the pleasant Cyclades to Attica, and past Athens and Thebes, and the Copic lake, and up the vale of Cephisus, and past the peaks of Oeta and Pindus, and over the rich Thessalian plains, till the sunny hills of Greece were behind him, and before him were the wilds of the north. Then he passed the Thracian mountains, and many a barbarous tribe, Paeons and Dardans and Tribali, till he came to the Ister stream, and the dreary Scythian plains. And he walked across the Ister dry-shod, and away through the moors and fens, day and night toward the bleak northwest, turning neither to the right hand nor the left, till he came to the unshapen land, and the place which has no name. And 7 days he walked through it, on a path which few can tell, for those who have trodden it like least to speak of it, and those who go there again in dreams are glad enough when they awake, till he came to the edge of the everlasting night, where the air was full of feathers, and the soil was hard with ice. And there at last he found the 3 grey sisters, by the shore of the freezing sea, nodding upon a white log of driftwood, beneath the cold white winter moon. And they chanted a low song together, Why the old times were better than the new. There was no living thing around them, not a fly, not a moss upon the rocks. Neither seal nor seagull dared come near, lest the ice should clutch them in its claws. The surge broke up in foam, but it fell again in flakes of snow, and it frosted the hair of the 3 grey sisters, and the bones in the ice cliff above their heads. They passed the eye from one to the other, but for all that they could not see, and they passed the tooth from one to the other, but for all that they could not eat, and they sat in the full glare of the moon, but they were none the warmer for her beams. And Perseus pitied the 3 grey sisters, but they did not pity themselves. So he said, O venerable mothers, wisdom is the daughter of old age. You therefore should know many things. Tell me, if you can, the path to the Gorgon. Then one cried,
Who is this who reproaches us with old age?
And another,
This is the voice of one of the children of men.
And he, I do not reproach, but honour your old age, and I am one of the sons of men, and of the heroes. The rulers of Olympus have sent me to you to ask the way to the Gorgon. Then one,
There are new rulers in Olympus, and all new things are bad.
And another,
We hate your rulers, and the heroes, and all the children of men. We are the kindred of the Titans and the giants and the Gorgons, and the ancient monsters of the deep.
And another,
Who is this rash and insolent man who pushes unbidden into our world?
And the first,
There never was such a world as ours, nor will be. If we let him see it, he will spoil it all.
Then one cried,
Give me the eye, that I may see him.
And another,
Give me the tooth, that I may bite him.
But Perseus, when he saw that they were foolish and proud, and did not love the children of men, left off pitying them, and said to himself, Hungry men must needs be hasty. If I stay making many words here, I shall be starved. Then he stepped close to them, and watched till they passed the eye from hand to hand. And as they groped about between themselves, he held out his own hand gently, till one of them put the eye into it, fancying that it was the hand of her sister. Then he sprang back, and laughed, and cried, Cruel and proud old women, I have your eye, and I will throw it into the sea, unless you tell me the path to the Gorgon, and swear to me that you tell me right. Then they wept and chattered and scolded, but in vain. They were forced to tell the truth, though, when they told it, Perseus could hardly make out the road.
You must go, they said, foolish boy, to the southward, into the ugly glare of the sun, till you come to Atlas the giant, who holds the heaven and the earth apart. And you must ask his daughters, the Hesperides, who are young and foolish like yourself. And now give us back our eye, for we have forgotten all the rest.
So Perseus gave them back their eye, but instead of using it, they nodded and fell fast asleep, and were turned into blocks of ice, till the tide came up and washed them all away. And now they float up and down like icebergs forever, weeping whenever they meet the sunshine, and the fruitful summer and the warm south wind, which fill young hearts with joy. But Perseus leaped away to the southward, leaving the snow and the ice behind, past the isle of the Hyperboreans and the Tin Isles, and the long Iberian shore, while the sun rose higher day by day upon a bright blue summer sea. And the terns and the seagulls swept laughing round his head, and called to him to stop and play, and the dolphins gambolled up as he passed, and offered to carry him on their backs. And all night long the sea nymphs sang sweetly, and the tritons blew upon their conches, as they played round Galatea their queen, in her car of pearled shells. Day by day the sun rose higher, and leaped more swiftly into the sea at night, and more swiftly out of the sea at dawn, while Perseus skimmed over the billows like a seagull, and his feet were never wetted, and leapt on from wave to wave, and his limbs were never weary, till he saw far away a mighty mountain, all rose-red in the setting sun. Its feet were wrapped in forests, and its head in wreaths of cloud, and Perseus knew that it was Atlas, who holds the heavens and the earth apart. He came to the mountain and leapt on shore, and wandered upward among pleasant valleys and waterfalls and tall trees and strange ferns and flowers. But there was no smoke rising from any glen, nor house, nor sign of man. At last he heard sweet voices singing, and he guessed that he was come to the garden of the nymphs, the daughters of the evening star. They sang like nightingales among the thickets, and Perseus stopped to hear their song. But the words which they spoke he could not understand, no, nor no man after him for many 100 years. So he stepped forward and saw them dancing, hand in hand around the charmed tree, which bent under its golden fruit. And round the tree foot was coiled the dragon, old Ladon, the sleepless snake, who lies there forever, listening to the song of the maidens, blinking and watching with dry, bright eyes. Then Perseus stopped, not because he feared the dragon, but because he was bashful before those fair maids. But when they saw him they too stopped, and called to him with trembling voices,
"Who are you? Are you Heracles the Mighty, who will come to rob our garden and carry off our golden fruit?"
And he answered, "I am not Heracles the Mighty, and I want none of your golden fruit. Tell me, fair nymphs, the way which leads to the Gorgon, that I may go on my way and slay her."
Not yet, fair boy. Come dance with us around the tree in the garden which knows no winter, the home of the south wind and the sun. Come hither and play with us a while. We have danced alone here for 1,000 years, and our hearts are weary with longing for a playfellow. So come.
"I cannot dance with you, fair maidens, for I must do the errand of the immortals. So tell me the way to the Gorgon, lest I wander and perish in the waves." Then they sighed and wept, and answered,
"The Gorgon? She will freeze you into stone."
"It is better to die like a hero than to live like an ox in a stall. The immortals have lent me weapons, and they will give me wit to use them." Then they sighed again and answered,
"Fair boy, if you are bent on your own ruin, be it so. We know not the way to the Gorgon, but we will ask the giant Atlas above upon the mountain peak, the brother of our father, the silver evening star. He sits aloft and sees across the ocean and far away into the unshapen land."
So they went up the mountain to Atlas their uncle, and Perseus went up with them. And they found the giant kneeling, as he held the heavens and the earth apart. They asked him, and he answered mildly, pointing to the seaboard with his mighty hand, "I can see the Gorgons lying on an island far away, but this youth can never come near them, unless he has the hat of darkness, which whosoever wears cannot be seen." Then cried Perseus, "Where is that hat, that I may find it?" But the giant smiled. "No living mortal can find that hat, for it lies in the depths of Hades, in the regions of the dead. But my nieces are immortal, and they shall fetch it for you, if you will promise me one thing, and keep your faith." Then Perseus promised, and the giant said, "When you come back with the head of Medusa, you shall show me the beautiful horror, that I may lose my feeling and my breathing, and become a stone forever, for it is weary labour for me to hold the heavens and the earth apart." Then Perseus promised, and the eldest of the nymphs went down, and into a dark cavern among the cliffs, out of which came smoke and thunder, for it was one of the mouths of hell. And Perseus and the nymphs sat down 7 days, and waited trembling, till the nymph came up again, and her face was pale, and her eyes dazzled with the light, for she had been long in the dreary darkness, but in her hand was the magic hat. Then all the nymphs kissed Perseus, and wept over him a long while, but he was only impatient to be gone, and at last they put the hat upon his head, and he vanished out of their sight. But Perseus went on boldly, past many an ugly sight, far away into the heart of the unshapen land, beyond the streams of ocean, to the isles where no ship cruises, where is neither night nor day, where nothing is in its right place, and nothing has a name. Till he heard the rustle of the Gorgons' wings, and saw the glitter of their brazen talons. And then he knew that it was time to halt, lest Medusa should freeze him into stone. He thought a while with himself, and remembered Athena's words. He rose aloft into the air, and held the mirror of the shield above his head, and looked up into it, that he might see all that was below him. And he saw the 3 Gorgons sleeping as huge as elephants. He knew that they could not see him, because the hat of darkness hid him. And yet he trembled as he sank down near them, so terrible were those brazen claws. 2 of the Gorgons were foul as swine, and lay sleeping heavily, as swine sleep, with their mighty wings outspread. But Medusa tossed to and fro restlessly, and as she tossed, Perseus pitied her. She looked so fair and sad. Her plumage was like the rainbow, and her face was like the face of a nymph. Only her eyebrows were knit, and her lips clenched, with everlasting care and pain. And her long neck gleamed so white in the mirror that Perseus had not the heart to strike, and said, "Ah, that it had been either of her sisters." But as he looked, from among her tresses the vipers' heads awoke, and peeped up with their bright dry eyes, and showed their fangs, and hissed. And Medusa, as she tossed, threw back her wings, and showed her brazen claws. And Perseus saw that, for all her beauty, she was as foul and venomous as the rest. Then he came down and stepped to her boldly, and looked steadfastly on his mirror, and struck with Herpa stoutly once, and he did not need to strike again. Then he wrapped the head in the goatskin, turning away his eyes, and sprang into the air aloft, faster than he ever sprang before. For Medusa's wings and talons rattled as she sank dead upon the rocks, and her 2 foul sisters woke, and saw her lying dead. Into the air they sprang, yelling, and looked for him who had done the deed. Thrice they swung round and round, like hawks who beat for a partridge, and thrice they snuffed round and round, like hounds who draw upon a deer. At last they struck upon the scent of the blood, and they checked for a moment to make sure, and then on they rushed with a fearful howl, while the wind rattled hoarse in their wings. On they rushed, sweeping and flapping, like eagles after a hare, and Perseus's blood ran cold for all his courage, as he saw them come howling on his track, and he cried, "Bear me well now, brave sandals, for the hounds of death are at my heels." And well the brave sandals bore him, aloft through cloud and sunshine, across the shoreless sea, and fast followed the hounds of death, as the roar of their wings came down the wind. But the roar came down fainter and fainter, and the howl of their voices died away, for the sandals were too swift, even for Gorgons, and by nightfall they were far behind, 2 black specks in the southern sky, till the sun sank, and he saw them no more. Then he came again to Atlas, and the garden of the nymphs. And when the giant heard him coming, he groaned and said, "Fulfill thy promise to me." Then Perseus held up to him the Gorgon's head, and he had rest from all his toil. For he became a crag of stone, which sleeps forever far above the clouds. Then he thanked the nymphs, and asked them, "By what road shall I go homeward again? For I wandered far round in coming hither." And they wept and cried, "Go home no more, but stay and play with us, the lonely maidens who dwell forever far away from gods and men." But he refused, and they told him his road, and said, "Take with you this magic fruit, which, if you eat once, you will not hunger for 7 days. For you must go eastward and eastward ever, over the doleful Libyan shore, which Poseidon gave to Father Zeus, when he burst open the Bosphorus and the Hellespont, and drowned the fair Lectonian land. And Zeus took that land in exchange, a fair bargain, much bad ground for a little good. And to this day it lies waste and desert with shingle and rock and sand." Then they kissed Perseus, and wept over him, and he leapt down the mountain and went on, lessening and lessening like a seagull, away and out to sea. So Perseus flitted onward to the north-east, over many a league of sea, till he came to the rolling sandhills and the dreary Libyan shore. And he flitted on across the desert, over rock ledges and banks of shingle and level wastes of sand, and shell drifts bleaching in the sunshine, and the skeletons of great sea monsters, and dead bones of ancient giants, strewn up and down upon the old sea floor. And as he went, the blood drops fell to the earth from the Gorgon's head, and became poisonous asps and adders, which breed in the desert to this day. Over the sands he went. He never knew how far or how long, feeding on the fruit which the nymphs had given him, till he saw the hills of the Scylli, and the dwarfs who fought with cranes. Their spears were of reeds and rushes, and their houses of the eggshells of the cranes, and Perseus laughed, and went his way to the north-east, hoping all day long to see the blue Mediterranean sparkling, that he might fly across it to his home. But now came down a mighty wind, and swept him back southward toward the desert. All day long he strove against it, but even the winged sandals could not prevail. So he was forced to float down the wind all night, and when the morning dawned there was nothing to be seen, save the same old hateful waste of sand. And out of the north the sandstorms rushed upon him, blood-red pillars and wreaths blotting out the noonday sun. And Perseus fled before them, lest he should be choked by the burning dust. At last the gale fell calm, and he tried to go northward again, but again came down the sandstorms, and swept him back into the waste, and then all was calm and cloudless as before. 7 days he strove against the storms, and 7 days he was driven back, till he was spent with thirst and hunger, and his tongue clove to the roof of his mouth. Here and there he fancied that he saw a fair lake, and the sunbeams shining on the water. But when he came to it, it vanished at his feet, and there was naught but burning sand. And if he had not been of the race of the immortals, he would have perished in the waste. But his life was strong within him, because it was more than man's. Then he cried to Athena, and said, O fair and pure, if thou hearest me, wilt thou leave me here to die of drought? I have brought thee the Gorgon's head at thy bidding, and hitherto thou hast prospered my journey. Dost thou desert me at the last? Else why will not these immortal sandals prevail, even against the desert storms? Shall I never see my mother more, and the blue ripple round Seriphos, and the sunny hills of Hellas? So he prayed, and after he had prayed there was a great silence. The heaven was still above his head, and the sand was still beneath his feet. And Perseus looked up, but there was nothing but the blinding sun in the blinding blue, and round him, but there was nothing but the blinding sand. And Perseus stood still a while, and waited, and said, Surely I am not here without the will of the immortals, for Athena will not lie. Were not these sandals to lead me in the right road? Then the road in which I have tried to go must be a wrong road. Then suddenly his ears were opened, and he heard the sound of running water. And at that his heart was lifted up, though he scarcely dare believe his ears, and weary as he was he hurried forward, though he could scarcely stand upright. And within a bowshot of him was a glen in the sand, and marble rocks and date trees, and a lawn of gay green grass. And through the lawn a streamlet sparkled and wandered out beyond the trees and vanished in the sand. The water trickled among the rocks, and a pleasant breeze rustled in the dry date branches, and Perseus laughed for joy, and leapt down the cliff, and drank of the cool water, and ate of the dates, and slept upon the turf, and leapt up and went forward again. But not toward the north this time, for he said, Surely Athena hath sent me hither, and will not have me go homeward yet. What if there be another noble deed to be done, before I see the sunny hills of Hellas? So he went east and east forever, by fresh oases and fountains, date palms and lawns of grass, till he saw before him a mighty mountain wall, all rose-red in the setting sun. Then he towered in the air like an eagle, for his limbs were strong again, and he flew all night across the mountain till the day began to dawn, and rosy-fingered Eos came blushing up the sky. And then, behold, beneath him was the long green garden of Egypt and the shining stream of Nile. And he saw cities walled up to heaven, and temples and obelisks and pyramids, and giant gods of stone. And he came down amid fields of barley and flax and millet and clambering gourds, and saw people coming out of the gates of a great city, and setting to work each in his place among the watercourses, parting the streams among the plants cunningly with their feet, according to the wisdom of the Egyptians. But when they saw him, they all stopped their work, and gathered round him, and cried, "Who art thou, fair youth? And what bearest thou beneath thy goatskin there? Surely thou art one of the immortals, for thy skin is white like ivory, and ours is red like clay. Thy hair is like threads of gold, and ours is black and curled. Surely thou art one of the immortals." And they would have worshipped him then and there. But Perseus said, "I am not one of the immortals, but I am a hero of the Hellens, and I have slain the Gorgon in the wilderness, and bear her head with me. Give me food, therefore, that I may go forward and finish my work." Then they gave him food and fruit and wine, but they would not let him go. And when the news came into the city that the Gorgon was slain, the priests came out to meet him, and the maidens with songs and dances, and timbrels and harps. And they would have brought him to their temple and to their king, but Perseus put on the hat of darkness and vanished away out of their sight. Therefore the Egyptians looked long for his return, but in vain, and worshipped him as a hero, and made a statue of him in Chemis, which stood for many 100 years. And they said that he appeared to them at times, with sandals a cubit long, and that whenever he appeared the season was fruitful, and the Nile rose high that year. Then Perseus went to the eastward, along the Red Sea shore, and then, because he was afraid to go into the Arabian deserts, he turned northward once more, and this time no storm hindered him. He flew on past pleasant hills and valleys, like Argos itself, or Lacedaemon, or the fair vale of Tempe. But the lowlands were all drowned by floods, and the highlands blasted by fire, and the hills heaved like a babbling cauldron before the wrath of King Poseidon, the shaker of the earth. And Perseus feared to go inland, but flew along the shore above the sea, and he went on all day, and the sky was black with smoke, and he went on all the night, and the sky was red with flame. And at the dawn of day he looked toward the cliffs, and at the water's edge under a black rock he saw a white image stand. "This," thought he, "must surely be the statue of some sea god. I will go near and see what kind of gods these barbarians worship." So he came near, but when he came it was no statue, but a maiden of flesh and blood, for he could see her tresses streaming in the breeze. And as he came closer still, he could see how she shrank and shivered when the waves sprinkled her with cold salt spray. Her arms were spread above her head, and fastened to the rock with chains of brass, and her head drooped on her bosom, either with sleep or weariness or grief. But now and then she looked up and wailed, and called her mother. Yet she did not see Perseus, for the cap of darkness was on his head. Full of pity and indignation, Perseus drew near and looked upon the maid. Her cheeks were darker than his were, and her hair was blue-black like a hyacinth. But Perseus thought, "I have never seen so beautiful a maiden, no, not in all our isles. Surely she is a king's daughter. Do barbarians treat their king's daughters thus? She is too fair, at least, to have done any wrong. I will speak to her." And, lifting the hat from his head, he flashed into her sight. She shrieked with terror, and tried to hide her face with her hair, for she could not with her hands. But Perseus cried, "Do not fear me, fair one. I am a Hellen, and no barbarian. What cruel men have bound you? But first I will set you free." And he tore at the fetters, but they were too strong for him, while the maiden cried, "Touch me not, I am accursed, devoted as a victim to the sea gods. They will slay you if you dare to set me free." "Let them try," said Perseus, and drawing Herpa from his thigh, he cut through the brass as if it had been flax. "Now," he said, "you belong to me, and not to these sea gods, whosoever they may be." But she only called the more on her mother. "Why call on your mother? She can be no mother to have left you here. If a bird is dropped out of the nest, it belongs to the man who picks it up. If a jewel is cast by the wayside, it is his who dare win it and wear it, as I will win you and will wear you. I know now why Pallas Athena sent me hither. She sent me to gain a prize worth all my toil and more." And he clasped her in his arms and cried, "Where are these sea gods, cruel and unjust, who doom fair maids to death? I carry the weapons of immortals. Let them measure their strength against mine. But tell me, maiden, who you are, and what dark fate brought you here?" And she answered, weeping, "I am the daughter of Cepheus, king of Iopa, and my mother is Cassiopeia of the beautiful tresses, and they called me Andromeda as long as life was mine, and I stand bound here, hapless that I am, for the sea monster's food, to atone for my mother's sin. For she boasted of me once that I was fairer than Atargatis, queen of the fishes. So she, in her wrath, sent the sea floods, and her brother the Fire King sent the earthquakes, and wasted all the land. And after the floods a monster bred of the slime, who devours all living things. And now he must devour me, guiltless though I am, me who never harmed a living thing, nor saw a fish upon the shore, but I gave it life and threw it back into the sea. For in our land we eat no fish, for fear of Atargatis their queen. Yet the priests say that nothing but my blood can atone for a sin which I never committed." But Perseus laughed and said, "A sea monster? I have fought with worse than him. I would have faced immortals for your sake. How much more a beast of the sea?" Then Andromeda looked up at him. A new hope was kindled in her breast, so proud and fair did he stand, with one hand round her, and in the other the glittering sword. But she only sighed and wept the more, and cried, "Why will you die, young as you are? Is there not death and sorrow enough in the world already? It is noble for me to die, that I may save the lives of a whole people. But you, better than them all, why should I slay you too? Go you your way, I must go mine." But Perseus cried, "Not so, for the lords of Olympus whom I serve are the friends of the heroes, and help them on to noble deeds. Led by them I slew the Gorgon, that beautiful horror, and not without them do I come hither, to slay this monster with that same Gorgon's head. Yet hide your eyes when I leave you, lest the sight of it freeze you too to stone." But the maiden answered nothing, for she could not believe his words. And then, suddenly looking up, she pointed to the sea, and shrieked, "There he comes, with the sunrise, as they promised. I must die now. How shall I endure it? Oh, go! Is it not dreadful enough to be torn piecemeal without having you to look on?" And she tried to thrust him away. But he said, "I go. Yet promise me one thing ere I go, that if I slay this beast, you will be my wife, and come back with me to my kingdom in fruitful Argos, for I am a king's heir. Promise me, and seal it with a kiss." Then she lifted up her face and kissed him, and Perseus laughed for joy and flew upward, while Andromeda crouched trembling on the rock, waiting for what might befall. On came the great sea monster, coasting along like a huge black galley, lazily breasting the ripple, and stopping at times by creek or headland to watch for the laughter of girls at their bleaching, or cattle pouring on the sandhills, or boys bathing on the beach. His great sides were fringed with clustering shells and seaweeds, and the water gurgled in and out of his wide jaws as he rolled along, dripping and glistening in the beams of the morning sun. At last he saw Andromeda, and shot forward to take his prey, while the waves foamed white behind him, and before him the fish fled, leaping. Then down from the height of the air fell Perseus like a shooting star, down to the crests of the waves, while Andromeda hid her face as he shouted, and then there was silence for a long while. At last she looked up, trembling, and saw Perseus springing toward her, and instead of the monster, a long black rock, with the sea rippling quietly round it. Who then so proud as Perseus, as he leapt back to the rock, and lifted his fair Andromeda in his arms, and flew with her to the cliff-top, as a falcon carries a dove? Who so proud as Perseus, and who so joyful as all the Aethiop people? For they had stood watching the monster from the cliffs, wailing for the maiden's fate. And already a messenger had gone to Cepheus and Cassiopeia, where they sat in sackcloth and ashes on the ground, in the innermost palace chambers, awaiting their daughter's end. And they came, and all the city with them, to see the wonder, with songs and with dances, with cymbals and harps, and received their daughter back again, as one alive from the dead. Then Cepheus said, "Hero of the Hellens, stay here with me and be my son-in-law, and I will give you the half of my kingdom." "I will be your son-in-law," said Perseus, "but of your kingdom I will have none, for I long after the pleasant land of Greece, and my mother, who waits for me at home." Then Cepheus said, "You must not take my daughter away at once, for she is to us like one alive from the dead. Stay with us here a year, and after that you shall return with honour." And Perseus consented, but before he went to the palace he bade the people bring stones and wood, and built 3 altars, one to Athena, and one to Hermes, and one to Father Zeus, and offered bullocks and rams. And some said, "This is a pious man." Yet the priests said, "The sea queen will be yet more fierce against us, because her monster is slain." But they were afraid to speak aloud, for they feared the Gorgon's head. So they went up to the palace, and when they came in, there stood in the hall Phineus, the brother of Cepheus, chafing like a bear robbed of her whelps, and with him his sons and his servants, and many an armed man. And he cried to Cepheus, "You shall not marry your daughter to this stranger, of whom no one knows even the name. Was not Andromeda betrothed to my son? And now she is safe again. Has he not a right to claim her?" But Perseus laughed and answered, "If your son is in want of a bride, let him save a maiden for himself. As yet he seems but a helpless bridegroom. He left this one to die, and dead she is to him. I saved her, alive, and alive she is to me, but to no one else. Ungrateful man, have I not saved your land, and the lives of your sons and daughters, and will you requite me thus? Go, or it will be worse for you." But all the men-at-arms drew their swords, and rushed on him like wild beasts. Then he unveiled the Gorgon's head, and said, "This has delivered my bride from one wild beast. It shall deliver her from many." And as he spoke, Phineus and all his men-at-arms stopped short, and stiffened, each man as he stood. And before Perseus had drawn the goatskin over the face again, they were all turned to stone. Then Perseus bade the people bring levers and roll them out, and what was done with them after I cannot tell. So they made a great wedding feast, which lasted 7 whole days, and who so happy as Perseus and Andromeda? But on the 8th night Perseus dreamed a dream, and he saw standing beside him Pallas Athena, as he had seen her in Seriphos 7 long years before. And she stood and called him by name, and said, "Perseus, you have played the man, and see, you have your reward. Know now that the gods are just, and help him who helps himself. Now, give me here Herpa, the sword, and the sandals, and the hat of darkness, that I may give them back to their owners. But the Gorgon's head you shall keep a while, for you will need it in your land of Greece. Then you shall lay it up in my temple at Seriphos, that I may wear it on my shield forever, a terror to the Titans and the monsters and the foes of gods and men. And as for this land, I have appeased the sea and the fire, and there shall be no more floods nor earthquakes. But let the people build altars to Father Zeus and to me, and worship the immortals, the lords of heaven and earth." And Perseus rose to give her the sword and the cap and the sandals. But he woke, and his dream vanished away. And yet it was not altogether a dream, for the goatskin with the head was in its place, but the sword and the cap and the sandals were gone, and Perseus never saw them more. Then a great awe fell on Perseus, and he went out in the morning to the people and told his dream, and bade them build altars to Zeus, the father of gods and men, and to Athena, who gives wisdom to heroes, and fear no more the earthquakes and the floods, but sow and build in peace. And they did so for a while, and prospered. But after Perseus was gone, they forgot Zeus and Athena, and worshipped again Atargatis the queen, and the undying fish of the sacred lake, where Deucalion's deluge was swallowed up. And they burnt their children before the Fire King, till Zeus was angry with that foolish people, and brought a strange nation against them out of Egypt, who fought against them, and wasted them utterly, and dwelt in their cities for many 100 years. And when a year was ended, Perseus hired Phoenicians from Tyre, and cut down cedars, and built himself a noble galley, and painted its cheeks with vermilion, and pitched its sides with pitch. And in it he put Andromeda, and all her dowry of jewels and rich shawls and spices from the east, and great was the weeping when they rode away. But the remembrance of his brave deed was left behind, and Andromeda's rock was shown at Iopa till more than 1,000 years were past. So Perseus and the Phoenicians rode to the westward, across the Sea of Crete, till they came to the blue Aegean and the pleasant isles of Hellas, and Seriphos, his ancient home. Then he left his galley on the beach, and went up as of old, and he embraced his mother, and Dictys his good foster-father, and they wept over each other a long while, for it was 7 years or more since they had met. Then Perseus went out, and up to the hall of Polydectes, and underneath the goatskin he bore the Gorgon's head. And when he came into the hall, Polydectes sat at the table head, and all his nobles and landowners on either side, each according to his rank, feasting on the fish and the goat's flesh, and drinking the blood-red wine. The harpers harped, and the revellers shouted, and the wine-cups rang merrily as they passed from hand to hand, and great was the noise in the hall of Polydectes. Then Perseus stood upon the threshold, and called to the king by name. But none of the guests knew Perseus, for he was changed by his long journey. He had gone out a boy, and was come home a hero. His eye shone like an eagle's, and his beard was like a lion's beard, and he stood up like a wild bull in his pride. But Polydectes the wicked knew him, and hardened his heart still more, and scornfully he called, "Ah, foundling, have you found it more easy to promise than to fulfil? Those whom the gods help fulfil their promises, and those who despise them reap as they have sown. Behold, the Gorgon's head." Then Perseus drew back the goatskin, and held aloft the Gorgon's head. Pale grew Polydectes and his guests as they looked upon that dreadful face. They tried to rise up from their seats, but from their seats they never rose, but stiffened, each man where he sat, into a ring of cold grey stones. Then Perseus turned and left them, and went down to his galley in the bay, and he gave the kingdom to good Dictys, and sailed away with his mother and his bride. And Polydectes and his guests sat still, with the wine-cups before them on the board, till the rafters crumbled down above their heads, and the walls behind their backs, and the table crumbled down between them, and the grass sprung up about their feet. But Polydectes and his guests sit on the hillside, a ring of grey stones, until this day. But Perseus rode westward toward Argos, and landed, and went up to the town. And when he came, he found that Acrisius his grandfather had fled. For Proetus his wicked brother had made war against him afresh, and had come across the river from Tiryns, and conquered Argos, and Acrisius had fled to Larissa in the country of the wild Pelasgi. Then Perseus called the Argives together, and told them who he was, and all the noble deeds which he had done. And all the nobles and the yeomen made him king, for they saw that he had a royal heart. And they fought with him against Argos, and took it, and killed Proetus, and made the Cyclops serve them, and build them walls round Argos, like the walls which they had built at Tiryns. And there were great rejoicings in the vale of Argos, because they had got a king from Father Zeus. But Perseus's heart yearned after his grandfather, and he said, "Surely he is my flesh and blood, and he will love me now that I am come home with honour. I will go and find him, and bring him home, and we will reign together in peace." So Perseus sailed away with his Phoenicians, round Hydrea and Sunium, past Marathon and the Attic shore, and through Euripus and up the long Euboean sea, till he came to the town of Larissa, where the wild Pelasgi dwelt. And when he came there, all the people were in the fields, and there was feasting, and all kinds of games. For Teutamenes their king wished to honour Acrisius, because he was the king of a mighty land. So Perseus did not tell his name, but went up to the games unknown, for he said, "If I carry away the prize in the games, my grandfather's heart will be softened toward me." So he threw off his helmet and his cuirass and all his clothes, and stood among the youths of Larissa, while all wondered at him, and said, "Who is this young stranger, who stands like a wild bull in his pride? Surely he is one of the heroes, the sons of the immortals, from Olympus." And when the games began, they wondered yet more, for Perseus was the best man of all at running and leaping and wrestling and throwing the javelin, and he won 4 crowns and took them. And then he said to himself, "There is a 5th crown yet to be won. I will win that, and lay them all upon the knees of my grandfather." And as he spoke, he saw where Acrisius sat, by the side of Teutamenes the king, with his white beard flowing down upon his knees, and his royal staff in his hand. And Perseus wept when he looked at him, for his heart yearned after his kin. And he said, "Surely he is a kingly old man, yet he need not be ashamed of his grandson." Then he took the quoits and hurled them 5 fathoms beyond all the rest, and the people shouted, "Further yet, brave stranger! There has never been such a hurler in this land." Then Perseus put out all his strength and hurled, but a gust of wind came from the sea, and carried the quoit aside, and far beyond all the rest, and it fell on the foot of Acrisius, and he swooned away with the pain. Perseus shrieked and ran up to him, but when they lifted the old man up he was dead, for his life was slow and feeble. Then Perseus rent his clothes and cast dust upon his head, and wept a long while for his grandfather. At last he rose, and called to all the people aloud, and said, "The gods are true, and what they have ordained must be. I am Perseus, the grandson of this dead man, the far-famed slayer of the Gorgon." Then he told them how the prophecy had declared that he should kill his grandfather, and all the story of his life. So they made a great mourning for Acrisius, and burnt him on a right rich pile. And Perseus went to the temple, and was purified from the guilt of the death, because he had done it unknowingly. Then he went home to Argos, and reigned there well with fair Andromeda. And they had 4 sons and 3 daughters, and died in a good old age. And when they died, the ancients say, Athena took them up into the sky, with Cepheus and Cassiopeia, and there on starlight nights you may see them shining still, Cepheus with his kingly crown, and Cassiopeia in her ivory chair, plaiting her star-spangled tresses, and Perseus with the Gorgon's head, and fair Andromeda beside him, spreading her long white arms across the heavens, as she stood when chained to the stone for the monster. All night long they shine, for a beacon to wandering sailors, but all day they feast with the gods, on the still blue peaks of Olympus.